So yes, the slides are in the chat, and we might as well get started. We've got a good little group here. Some people I know, some people I don't know. We are going to do brief introductions here in a minute, just so I know who's in the audience. But we are here to talk about English and getting through accreditation for English, whether state level, SPA level. Yeah, so let's get started and see if I can actually do these slides the right way. Oh, nope, I got to do it through, how do I do this? I was trying to present, but.
I think on the bottom, if you hit navigate forward.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. See, right? I usually just share screen, but I was like, no, I can do this. All right, here's our plan. I really have a plan, I promise. Welcome introductions. We'll talk about writing the program reports. We'll talk about different assessments. We'll talk about the NCTE 2021 standards, and then also give you all some resources. Please, if you have any questions at any time, I'm going to pull the chat open, but I also have Jennifer here to help me out. So interrupt, raise a hand, throw something in chat, let me know what's going on. All right, introductions. We're going to go around. You can tell us who you are, where you're at, what's your role in this process. Are you the SPA writer or the program writer? Have you done this before? Is this your first time? Anything else you want to know? And I love to provide exemplars and show off my little ones. So I am a professor of English education at Charleston Southern University. I am also the assistant dean in the College of Ed and the coordinator for accreditation. I do CAPE site visits. I have been with NCTE since 2010. I became a lead reviewer, so I led the team starting in 2014, and then I was asked to step into the coordinator role in August of 2022, which I was not supposed to be assistant dean at that point, so yes, I'm over my head, but that's okay. I also have two little ones at home, Addie and Allie, and they are keeping me on my toes on the daily, and just jumping through all the hoops. So that's why I'm a little scattered these days. They're definitely taking my brain away from me. All right, we will go through, and I'm going to actually have Jennifer introduce herself first, because she is here to kind of help us out.
Thanks, Carrie. Hey, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wise. I work in Lexington School District 2 as a content coordinator, and I am a member of the PRC. So I'll be here being able to speak from and give any perspective from the state side of things.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, going down my screen. Amy, you are next on my screen.
Sorry, I'm getting my camera loading. Hi, I'm Amy Kunkel. I'm the accreditation coordinator at USCB. I also work with the interns and senior seminar class at USCB. I also have two little ones, but I have little boys. So I have a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy who also take my brain away from me. So
all right. Awesome. Have you written a report before?
Nope. This is my, I mean, I've done just the basic, I've been in my role about a year, so I've done the basic, just, you know, data report to the State Department, but that's about it.
Okay, this is fun stuff. All right, next on my list is Erin.
Hey everybody, my name is Erin Hamill. I'm the Associate Dean in the College of Education, Sport, and Human Sciences at Winthrop University. And I'm only in my second year in this position, so I'm still learning all the things. And we just submitted our SPA reports last spring. And so we are now working through all those fun next steps.
Awesome. All right, Cindy, you're next on my list.
All right, hi, I'm Cindy Vaughn, the Associate Dean of the College of Education at Anderson University. Within this role, I'm also Assessment Coordinator, so I work across with CAPE and all of the SPAs and specialty areas. We have completed our CAPE accreditation visit. We're all recognized with everything right now, and now with some of our programs where we're at is realigning to new standards so that we're going to be ready for the next thing that comes down the road. So
all right, awesome. Next on my list is Judy Beck.
Good morning, everyone. Did you notice the relief in Cindy's voice when she said we just finished that round? So you got 7 years to recover. So I am the Dean of the School of Education at USC Aiken. So my role in the process is, of course, the big picture, but then also we have newer faculty members. So I'm mentoring them and really taking the lead on the NCTE, the ELA program writing process. Yeah, I've been doing program reports for CAPE and SPAs for over 20 years, have been a SPA program reviewer. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. All right, next up is Judy Dix.
Hi, my name is Judy Dix. I am the Director of Educational Assessment and Accreditation at the Citadel, the Zucker Family School of Education. I have been in this role now for almost 2 years, but I have been involved in NCATE back in the day, long time ago. So started out with NCATE and SPAs, and then I left the state for a few years and have just returned. So those other states I were at were not SPA states. So I'm getting back into the SPA reporting stuff. I will actually be, basically, we have very small faculty, so I will most likely be writing a lot of these reports and consulting with our content folks. I'm also a CAPE site reviewer, but I don't actually have a content area specialty. So I'm very familiar with the SPAs, but that's, and the writing of the reports, but this will be the first time I'm actually doing it and overseeing it. So.
So Judy, what state were you in so we all know where to move so we don't have to deal with SPAs?
Oh my God. So they both have their own things that are not always so fun either. I was in Georgia and I was in Texas.
Gotcha. Thanks.
All right, we've got two Sams, so we'll start with Sam Morris.
Good morning. I'm Sam Morris. I am Assistant Professor of English, Secondary English Education Program Coordinator at USCB. We did do our CAPE accreditation not too long ago, but we have yet, in the English Education Program, we have yet to hit 10 completers. We're on track to do that in the fall, so that'll be fun. I don't have experience with the SPA report writing. However, I've been a member of ELATE. I actually trained and taught with Chris Gehring, who's the past president of ELATE and was president when they did the 2021 standards. So I know a lot more about those than I do the report writing.
We all have our expertise. And then the other Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam Mooneyham, and I am currently in the recovery stage of COVID, and so that is why my camera is off, out of an abundance of respect for you all and my occasional coughing bouts. I am the middle and secondary program director for Converse University, and also the director of field experiences. And I have no experience, however, with writing a SPA report. And so I am taking copious notes and appreciate all of your resources.
Awesome. All right. I think I hit everybody. We're a small little group. We have people who are familiar with report writing. We have people who are familiar with the standards. So I have a huge slide deck. I put the link in the chat. If you can't get that, let me know. I can put that up again. But let's roll into this. If you have any questions, again, please interrupt, because these days, like, it kind of like is ingrained in me. So I think people know things they don't always know, as we do with our students, right? All right, program reports, whether you're writing a state report or a program, a SPA report, whichever way, it's the same basic thing. I actually sat on the earlier session and they did a really great job about talking about the state template that is now available, and the fact that there's that fourth option. My programs have used that fourth option. Actually, we usually do it at the third step, because once we get the first two response, we're like moving on. Let's work with some state, because we too are a very small program, and getting to that 10 is hard sometimes. We're getting better, but it takes a little while to get to those 10 completers. Yes, so program reports, no matter if you're writing it for the state or for the SPA, there are 5, possibly 6 sections. And so I'm going to briefly go through them. Well, let me go through. I got the information. All right, the first section is all about context. This is where you are telling who you are to the reviewers. So you provide an overview of your program. Who are your faculty? What's the program of studies? Typically, you can upload a PDF of your actual program of studies. What do your field and clinical experiences look like? So this is your chance to tell the story of who you are, where you're at, the basics. Section 2 is a chart, and this is where you basically are just listing out your 6, 7, or 8 key assessments. We'll talk about what those look like later. But that's basically all you're doing, is listing out the actual assessments and when they are administered in your program. It can look like this. This is what the template in AIMS looks like. And the state version looks similar to this. We'll talk in a minute about the specific ones for NCTE. But no matter what your SPA program is, there's always going to be a praxis content, another content. Assessment 3 is always about planning and instruction. Assessment 4 is about that student teaching internship. Assessment 5 is effects on student learning, which South Carolina, by the way, y'all, we are actually spoiled that we get some data. Just FYI, other states really struggle for that. Assessment 6 in NCT is actually a required one. With anti-racist, anti-bias, and then 7 and 8 are optional. Section 3 in the report then is just another chart, and this is where you link you link the assessments to the standards. And in NCTE, we actually just recently made a move from just being the whole standard to actual component level. There was a working group that got together because it was originally the template was put out at the standard level, but there was just confusion on the program report side, on the reviewer side, so we moved it to the component level. Oh, I thought I updated this. Sorry. So actually, when you look at the template now, there is a line for each component, and I apologize for not having the most up-to-date one here. It is on the NCTE website and the CAPE website, the most current template. But we do want you looking at component level, because depending on the standard, not all components are required in order to meet the standard, which gives us a little bit of breathing room, which is kind of nice. And I have a slide later that talks about that. Section 4 is where you actually provide your evidence. So these are PDFs, 1 per assessment, where you combine all this information. And so basically it's a 2-page narrative that talks about what is the assessment, how does it align with the standards, what's a brief analysis of your data, and then how does that data actually link back to the standards. After you provide that narrative, you then provide the actual assessment instrument, the rubric you're using, and then data charts. And this, again, should really be 1 document. Back in the day when I started this, programs would give like 5 documents and we couldn't figure out what went with what. So providing this and combining those all into 1 document makes it easier for you, because you know what you're submitting, and makes it easier for the reviewers, because again, you want reviewers to understand your story in order for them to give you recognition. Again, this is from the AIMS template, and what I want to bring your attention to is halfway down the page, it breaks it down into the 2-page narrative. So if you see the 1 parentheses, a 2-page narrative, gives you those 4 areas, and then the assessment documentation. For those of you who are assessment coordinators across your whole unit, I actually, way back in the day when I started this, created a template that had these headings that I would give to my content people, and have them fill it in. I would go back and gloss over it and make it a little prettier. But then everyone was doing the same thing because it didn't, especially section 1, they don't always get all 4 parts. Now, section D of part 1 is really the meat of it. This is where you say, this assessment is doing these things and it aligns with these components. And so we're doing exactly what we need to be doing. And then providing the documentation as well. And this is the template I actually give to my programs. So if you want this, I can email it to you. Just let me know. All right, so here's the actual assessments. I'm doing this quickly because they did it this morning. If you need me to slow down, give me a wave or a hand up or something like that. And by the way, allergies, y'all, right? South Carolina in March. All right, assessment 1 is required. This is typically a state-specific licensure exam. And in South Carolina, we have the joy of having Praxis. 5038 and 5039 are the 2 English Praxis exams. I suggest having your candidates do one or the other because otherwise the data gets wonky because you're trying to compare 2 different things. And I honestly, off the top of my head, don't remember which one I have mine do. The state accepts both, but I would make sure the candidates pick one or the other. Just it makes your life easier when looking at data and things like that. Assessment 2 is a content-based assessment. So this is your second chance to say, hey, they know their content. It can be grades, but again, CAPE has a very specific protocol for grades. It's pretty easy to follow. If you're in a post-bac program, so a master's program, you can use transcripts. That is also really useful. Yeah, Judy.
So I'm sorry, I wanted to ask about assessment 2. Wait, we are on assessment 2, aren't we?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any, so if you don't, we have, again, a very small program. We just redid all of our assessments up to the 2021 standards. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be submitting to the state because we have no completers for the past 3 years. So I'm concerned about assessment 2 because we developed all new assessments except for assessment 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if outside of a transcript or an assessment, or I'm sorry, a transcript or a GPA assessment, if there was something else that you guys thought like would be a good thing or something that maybe needs to like really touch on certain standards. That's
right. So sometimes English programs decide to go with a portfolio because that works very well in our world of looking at items, revising papers, doing along those lines. The content assessment is really, I know personally in my institution, we use course grades because my candidates take very specific courses and I'm able to explain what the courses they're taking are, what they do in those courses in the English department, and then how that directly aligns to the standard. So as long as, and then it's like this chart that gets fleshed out. And then I do student grade, like follow their thing for student grade. So programs usually do either that transcript analysis or the student grades because that's just the easiest way, but some programs do choose to do English content portfolios. There's no right answer. That's what we love about accreditation, right? There's no right answer. Lots of wrong answers, but no right answer. All right, did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Assessment 3 is how can these candidates actually plan instruction? And this is just the planning. So these are lesson plans or unit plans with rationales, looking at that idea that they can actually do the planning, which then leads into assessing how they actually implement it. So assessment 4 is looking at student teaching. I think across South Carolina, most of us use the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0, but when you're using something that's that big, you really do want to create a second rubric that you really look at the English part, because programs who send through those big student teaching assessments, they usually get conditions because it's not specific to English. We have a small working group, and this doesn't help my group for coming up for review this semester, but hopefully by the end of April, we're going to have a resource out there that helps provide wording for those addendums for each standard. I keep calling it the magic book, but I need ELATE and NCTE's blessing on that. We actually spent the past couple weeks wordsmithing rubrics. And boy, when you get a bunch of us in a room wordsmithing a rubric, it's either really fun or really frustrating. We actually had a blast doing it. So once we get NCTE's blessing on that, I'll be able to start sending that out. And that's actually rubrics that you can then adapt to put in your program for your addendum, and it aligns specifically with like this type of assessment. If you're doing the EdTPA, it could be candidate videos, and they do self-reflections, lots of options for assessment for, but it's really looking at that actual student teaching last semester before they graduate. Assessment 5 is their impact on student learning. This is teacher work samples. It's having your candidates actually look at what they've taught their students and have they taught them something, aka effects on student learning. The one thing in the last training I actually did, my last bullet, like I should pay attention to what I put on slides, right? The last bullet is actually results from employer surveys, including retention and employment milestones. I've not really seen programs do that. I know when I do my big CAPE report, which we just got through CAPE as well last year, yay, we look at that data, but I hadn't thought about it really at the program level. And I don't know if that's because we're a small program, very limited on graduates, but that's another way to look at effects on student learning. So it could be down the road. I guess my one caveat that when I put my CAPE head on is it says assessment of candidate effect on student learning. So employer surveys, that's the flag in my mind. So it's a possibility, but you'd have to really show how that works in your program. But having students look at pre-post data in a unit is a great way of showing this. All right, assessment 6 in the NCTE world is required, and this is specifically to look at anti-racist, anti-bias instruction. When we jump into the standards here in a moment, you'll see that that's a theme that runs across. It's a cross-cutting theme across all the standards, and so we really want to see one assessment that really helps on that. For those of you familiar with the 2012 standards, we did social justice when they moved towards the new 2021 standards. That they decided to flesh that out more across all the standards. So, but we still want to see an assessment that really focuses on that anti-racist, anti-bias instruction. Again, lots of ways of doing this. Optional assessments 7 and 8. Oh yeah, sorry, Amy.
Hi, sorry. I just want to seek clarification quickly because I went to the general session before this and they did not mention anything about the anti-racist, anti-bias in section 6. It was just like anything that you think would be helpful. So is this specific to English, like secondary English?
Yep,
Okay.
This is one of our, we jump into the actual standards that have been revised, you'll see that this is a theme that goes across all the standards. And so when they were putting this together, the working group that actually was working before COVID, and they decided, no, we need one assessment that really focuses in on this. So for programs who've been working in the 2012 standards, it's easy to kind of take the social justice assignment and tweak it a little bit. But again, this is an assessment that in the earlier session, they said, don't mark all the standards for the assessments, but this is a cross-cutting theme. So this is an assessment that's probably going to hit all the components or most of the components in NCTE at least. So for other SPAs, not so much. It could be whatever, but for NCTE, they really want this 6th assessment to look at anti-racist, anti-bias. Does that help? Mm-hmm. All right, 7 and 8 can be anything. This is like the icing on the cake. So if you're looking through that chart from section 3 and you're noticing that one of your standards or a couple of your components aren't covered in depth enough, this is a chance to have an assessment that helps back that up, because we're looking for a preponderance of evidence. Not my words, way before my time, but a preponderance of evidence that the candidates are meeting the different components of each of the standards. Data requirements, and this is a little different. At the SPA level, they only need to have programs submitting for SPA, and this is a change, only have to have 2 consecutive applications of the data. So it sounded like, and I was in and out of the last session, but they want 3 applications of the data. I like 3 applications of the data because it gives you more data to look at and more trends to examine and all that kind of stuff. But CAPE only requires 2 consecutive applications of the data. And I had to like Google search that and dive into all the documents, because I was like, what? And yeah, that's really what it says. Page 63, section E, right? So again, it doesn't really talk about number of program completers, but 2 applications of data. So low enrollment programs can still come through SPA as long as you have those 2 consecutive applications. All right, Judy first.
I didn't think that was the case. I feel like in Ames, it says like if you have under 5 over 3 years that you don't submit. I could be wrong, but I feel like that was kind of, it was like that was the number somewhere.
Okay, that might be the magic number. I don't recall that, because here's with NCTE, with our new standards coming out, programs have had limited time to move to the new standards.
Right.
And so we as reviewers, I've been talking with my reviewers, we're trying to be very generous in our feedback of maybe we give conditions of collect 1 more application of the data. And even if that's only 2, that sometimes works in our world. So it really is a case by case basis in NCTE world because of the new standards and limited time. But we are looking for 2 consecutive applications of data. Now that doesn't mean that some programs haven't submitted with no data whatsoever. Obviously they get conditions. They're doing that to get feedback to make sure their assessments are lining up with the new standards, and they know that they're going to be getting those conditions coming at them.
Okay.
And you can kind of keep that same mindset for the low enrollment programs.
Okay, thank you.
Again, this is just if you were doing an initial review at the SPA level, you need 2 applications of data. They do still want 3 of the state licensure exam, which gets confusing. Like, Kate, make up your mind. If you're doing a response to conditions, you only have to have 1 application of the data, and only have to submit the revised assessments at the SPA level at least. Section 5 is where we as English people thrive and flourish, because we want to tell our story, and this is where we get to tell our story of, yes, we've given all these assessments, but here's what it means. And I think they did a really good job in the previous session, and the state template does a really good job of fleshing out that we really want you all looking at content knowledge, professional and pedagogical knowledge, skills and dispositions, and student learning. So how do these assessments so it's like looking at it from a different lens. So how are these assessments meeting these 3 areas? And then what are you doing with this data? So it's kind of the so what of, great, you're collecting all this data, but are you making programmatic changes based on it? Are you switching courses that they were required to take? Or are you changing assessments to make sure you're really getting at what the standards are looking at? So this is kind of your chance to flourish and tell your story. In the CAPE template, you are limited to 12,000 characters, which actually is a lot of characters. State level, I don't think there's a character limit, so you can kind of go as long as you want. But again, be thoughtful of your reviewers. They don't want to read 12 pages. Assessment results, again, it's a narrative. You do want to organize it by those 3 areas: content, pedagogy and professional knowledge, skills and dispositions, and student learning. And that's what it looks like in the Ames template. And so how are decisions made? This is like the pulling back the curtain. We're really, as reviewers, we're looking for a preponderance of evidence. meaning that you're providing enough evidence to show you're meeting the standards and the components. No, we have not quantified that. And I'm sure Jennifer, who loves math, is going, why isn't there a number there? Because there isn't. It looks different for every program. Different SPAs do like to make sure in your rubrics that you quantify what you're looking for. But English, we're more words based. And so you'll notice when those sample rubrics come out in the future that we didn't really put specific numbers with things because we struggle with that, but it's not our world. We're a words world, not a numbers world. So, all right, questions about the form, I guess, that you're filling out, the template. Cool, let's get into the standards. These are good, I like them. All right, so you can find these standards in a bunch of different places. A couple places it was actually referred to as the 2020 standards, but we all know that 2020 was mass chaos in the world, so they didn't actually come out till 2021. So they are the 2021 NCTE standards. We do have a crosswalk that was created by the writers of these standards that look at the 2012 standards to the 21 standards. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this, but if you want to get deep into this, but basically the old standard 1 and 2 were both content. Now it's the new standard 2 content. But that means that your components are looking at reading and writing and those kinds of things, language and languaging. I love that we come up with our own words. Standards 3 and 4 were about planning. They're the new standard 3. Standard 5 was about the learners and learning, and they're now that, and also implementing it. That has been broken apart into standard 1 and standard 4. Again, I'll talk more about these, just giving you an overview. The old standard 6 now goes across all of them. So the old standard 6 was social justice, and now it's embedded in all of the different standards. And the old standard 7 about professional knowledge is now the new standard 5. So we've gone from 7 standards down to 5 standards. Big ideas. Learners and learning is standard 1. Content knowledge is standard 2. Standard 3 is about planning. Standard 4 is about implementing. And standard 5 is about being professionals. Early on, when I was first playing with these, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds just like InTask. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Duh. But some people don't make that connection right away. So I want to put that out there that if you are doing everything by InTask, you can easily convert that into NCTE standard world. But yeah, that was like one of those moments of like, wow, how did I not figure this out? All right, standard 1 is all about who our learners are. And so you've got the big words of the standards, but what we're really looking at is at the component level. Knowing who your learners are, the fact that you can gather data, you know who adolescents are, and that you can take that and do something with that data of knowing who they are. So that's kind of what standard 1 is all about. There are 3 components. In order for this standard to be met, you only have to meet 2 of those components. So if you're really strong in 2 areas and not so much in the other, you can still meet this standard. And so that's why the reports now are at the component level, not the big standard level. It helps us flesh out what you're doing well and what we need to work on. Standard 2 is all about content knowledge. So we have the big standard knowledge, or standard wording, apply and demonstrate knowledge and theoretical perspectives, including anti-racist, anti-bias, ELA, pertaining to text, composing, language, and languaging. And so that's basically what component 1 is all about. I think about it as the reading part. Component 2 is all about the writing part, and component 3 is about the grammar. And that's kind of how I categorize it in my mind. This standard, you do need to meet all 3. Because, yeah, if you're going to teach English, you need to be doing all of those. Standard 3 only has 2 components, and this is all about planning. So can they plan and can they assess? Plan the assessments, not actually do the assessments. So component 1 is about planning all the instruction, and component 2 is, are these assessments actually assessing what you've planned? For this standard, both components are required in order for the standard to be met. Standard 4 is implementing. So this is when they're in the classroom actually doing what they do. So can they implement planned, coherent, relevant, standards aligned, differentiated, and anti-racist, anti-bias ELA instruction and assessment to motivate and engage all learners? So not only implement the plans they've written, but also implement the assessments. And finally, component 3 is all about, do you communicate that back to your learners? Do they know how they're doing on what you're teaching them and assessing them? So I like component 3. For this standard, only 2 of these 3 are required for the standard to be met. So if that communication part, which we sometimes forget about, but it's really important with feedback, if that's not as done as well as the others, you can still meet this standard. And then the last standard is professional responsibility for English language arts teachers. Can they reflect on who they are? Can they take feedback in and change their practice? Can they work with families? Are they ready to be leaders? That's the basics of standard 5. 3 of these 4 components needs to be met for this standard to be met. Lots of new terms with the new standards that some programs are more familiar with, some are not. In fact, some of the changes that I've seen coming through with the new standards when programming is based on the language, the terminology, which I have found really interesting. So they're like renaming courses and redesigning courses because they're missing parts of the standards. Either the anti-racist, anti-bias instruction, the idea of language and languaging, the idea of the constructive adolescence. So this terminology is all fleshed out in the standards document that you have access to. All right, questions on the quick overview of the standards? They're actually really fun. I like them. They're simplified. It's just, I don't know, it's easier to get my brain around as the methods instructor. Was that all of it? I must have jumped out a whole bunch of stuff. All right. Wow. I went faster than I thought. What questions can I answer? Jennifer's been sitting so long, her lights went out on her.
So we had like a redesign of assessments this past fall to align with all the new standards. And again, we haven't had any candidates, so we've just created assessments. And I pulled up our assessment 6.
Okay.
And is it okay if I kind of tell you what it's about? And you can tell me whether or not it's appropriate?
Yeah, that's great.
So it's learning how to learn with multi-language learners.
Mm-hmm.
And it covers standard 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.3, 4.1, 4.3, 5.1, and 5.3.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I need to pull up the assignment that goes with it but I'm just looking at the rubric. And I mean, it does incorporate all the, the verbiage about anti-race and anti-bias. And like I said, I'm not a content person, so that's what I'm asking.
No, okay.
So, but do you think that sounds like?
I think that's a good start into it. You probably will want to have some other assessments because that's very specific to multilingual learners, it sounds like.
Yes, it is.
So if in some of your other assessments, you're also attending to the anti-racist, anti-bias, then I think that would provide a possible preponderance of evidence.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, that should work.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want, I mean, we can set up a Zoom time and we can pull up that document and really kind of work.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Yes. I will take you up on that.
Yes, just send me an email. We'll find a Zoom time Teams time, but a time to get together. And I do that with programs all the time because, again, I would rather help programs in the beginning than have to figure out the conditions and what the reviewers have said. So
Yeah, and like you don't want to, you want to put out like the best assessment you can for the students, and not teach them what they need to know. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
all right, Judy.
So just following up on that discussion right there, I'm going to make a statement and tell me if this is accurate or not. The reason why, so that could be good for getting some of the components, but the reason you might need something more would be because that's a very specific population. And number one says all learners. And so that's only some learners and not all learners. So if that, maybe that particular assessment, and I don't know this, but if it was used in a, I'm going to say a gen ed type classroom instead of with just multilingual learners, it would be more likely to address the anti-racist, anti-biased.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's something, I think it's more used a lot in literacy, in our literacy program. So I think there was, some trying to kind of combine some of those things together and see if they work. But that makes sense that it would be for all learners. So thank you for making that.
Yeah, and when you dive into the standards, this is probably why you picked out specific components to focus on, because not all components have the anti-racist, anti-bias explicitly stated in them, if that makes sense. So when you're looking at content, it's these lived experiences kind of for component 2.1 kind of gets at that anti-racist, anti-bias, which is in the big standard. And perspectives in component 2. So it's not always as explicit in the component as it is in the standard, if that makes sense. And I am hoping, by the way, to have in April, that's my hope. I don't know. We'll see how it works out, because there's actual reasoning behind why they made the components they made it. There's all the sources and all that kind of stuff that just hasn't been put out there. I think it was a COVID issue. Things just got a little wonky during COVID. So we've got this resource now. We're finalizing it to hopefully get it published and out to programs. So when I talk with my reviewers, I tell them, I said, we do need to work with this, but programs haven't been given much to work with. They've been given the standards and some terms, but not the thoughts behind it. So sometimes programs need why the reasoning behind why the standard looks the way it does. Yeah. Other questions? Sam, are you still here? Who worked on the standards? Was that Sam Morris?
Yeah, I didn't actually work on the standards. I just worked with the person.
Okay, I didn't know, does that, because actually the working group that was wordsmithing the rubric, we did have someone who worked on the standards, and it was so funny. She's like, I don't remember, that was a while ago. I was like, yeah, it was in 2019, and now we're in 2024.
Yeah, it was actually pretty funny. It took so long for it to get released. When he did his session on it at NCTE, it actually conflicted with one of our late roundtables. It was like, can we do this, please, so we can roll it out?
Yes. Yeah. So we are so close to getting the quote. I call it the magic book, and everyone laughs at me, but it's this is the background, all that there. And as we get different parts approved, we will get that. I do see that we had Emily had joined us while we were in the midst of, or I was in the midst of talking at you all. Emily, do you have any questions or things that you didn't catch earlier in the presentation? And if not, that's okay.
Carrie, we do have one question in the chat asking if you can define languaging.
Ah, yes. And I am actually going to pull it up because they have a very interesting definition for it. I like it, but I don't want to misspeak. When you get to the actual standards document, it gives it. Give me one moment. Because yes, when I first came up with them, I'm like, wow, they totally made up a word, and kind of a yes, but not totally. So language is the structure of English language, grammar, usage, mechanics. Languaging is how we use it and the systems of power. So that's where the anti-racist, anti-bias comes into it. Because if you're not speaking standard English, like if you don't come from a home that has standard English, you face some obstacles in the classroom. So does that help define that? So that's kind of how I take it. So languaging is definitely like the use of it, but also that the implied that in an English classroom, you should only be using and acknowledging standard English, which is not real because our students don't really speak standard English. Most of us don't always speak standard English in our homes. So yeah.
So Carrie, can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes.
Because and again, my background is not ELA, it is science. So when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking about how am I going to, looking at the content knowledge slide that we're looking at right now, how am I going to potentially show that a candidate applies and demonstrates knowledge and perspectives, and they include, when I think about it, I'm including languaging. Now, component 2.1 doesn't say languaging, but am I going to need to, like, we have an ELA addendum for our student teaching rubric. Am I going to have to does it get to the point where I'm going to have to in some way say, and look, here's the, student dealing or candidate dealing with languaging?
No, because it's really, that's in the, I'm teaching a content literacy class right now to our juniors. And when I talk to literacy about them, I try to get across to them that it's reading, it's writing, and it's also talking, that communicating part. And languaging really comes in with that communicating, but it also comes back to the text that they're reading, not just giving, no offense, the dead old white guys for them to read, but actually giving them texts that are written from different perspectives, possibly use non-standard English, those kinds of ideas, and bringing that into their classrooms.
So it just made me think about, and I can't even remember what book it is, but one of those dead old white guys, Mark Twain maybe, or something like that, used to put in their language from wherever he was at, Mississippi, whatever, which is not standard. And yesterday I was listening to someone who has a Gullah Geechee background, and she started kind of using the slang, the Gullah Geechee language. And so that's what that languaging is getting at.
Yeah, the fact that is something to be talked about, letting students know, the difference between the two. But I think as, someone implementing these standards in my methods class, we talk about bringing a wide variety of texts in, and it's not just text types, but it's also like the content of the text that they're reading. And then also the output. So what are they doing presentation wise, writing wise, those kinds of things, depending on the audience. So if they're in a formal interview, it looks very different than if they're talking with their friends and presenting to their friends. So thinking about audience and languaging plays a big role in that.
Fantastic. I understand now. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions? We have, I think, about 10 minutes in this session or so. I don't remember how long we were supposed to go to.
Carrie, I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so again, looking at the same slide, when I was going through our stuff, I'll say our assessments and so on, component 2.1, 2.2 are fairly standard from the old standards. But then I look at content or component 2.3 and I think, okay, this is a little bit different. or new, I should say. And again, I'm assuming it came out of that whole trying to focus on the anti-racist, anti-biased in this languaging.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that our current assessments have anything that would get at that. It would be kind of like, I could make a case that it's implied and, which I don't want to do because like you, I know how important it is to keep the reviewers happy and you don't want to try and pull the wool over their eyes. So because you only have to, in order to meet the standard, you have to do 2 of these 3 components.
No, standard 2, you actually,
Oh, it is all 3.
You do all the components.
Okay, so let's say I'm like, yeah, component 2.3, we got nothing. I would potentially get back standard not met, and would need to come up with something that would align with component 2.3, or not just 2.3, but potentially something else which also incorporated 2.3.
Right. And it wouldn't, I don't think it would definitely come back not met. It would probably be a met with conditions, and the condition, because this is a new standard, the reviewers would hopefully flesh out that it's like, oh, it's just that 3-part.
Gotcha. So because the 2 components, let's say we met, because before I've seen where if it required all 3 and you didn't meet all 3, then you didn't even meet the standard.
Right.
So what you're saying now is potentially it could be met with conditions because not having, okay, great. Yay.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have you seen, and I know it, it's new, so you might not have seen anything, but what are your thoughts on something that might get at component 2.3, an assessment or something?
Right. So we've only gone through really 1 cycle of new submissions having to use these new standards. We had a big lead-in time up to these new standards. And this fall, we did not have any exemplars that have stood out. So no, I don't have any good examples. And in my back of my mind, I'm like, I will come up with the great examples because I'm also going to have to do this. I got nothing yet. Hopefully. So
fair enough.
Can
we learn from the non-examples though?
I think it's just not even present. I think component 2.3 is one of the areas that programs are really struggling with. And it's just not even present. So I think it's the addendums.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's where this is going to come in. So during clinical practice, the addendum to the 4.0, because don't submit the 4.0, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's the addendum of how does that look in teaching it in the real classroom. So I think addendums is really where this is going to come.
Let me ask you something else, because, as a reviewer and then as a report writer, I've always struggled with, because the secondary folks all have the addendum to get at, like I was doing science. So we had to have one for lab safety.
Yes.
So I always struggled with, can I include that with assessment, the student teaching the rubric? Can I do the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 rubric with the addendum as one assessment? Or is that considered 2 assessments and therefore I need to use it as a one of the optional ones?
Right. So here's how I do it. I actually, when I submitted mine, I did not do the 4.0 rubric at all. I just did the addendum. Oh. Because when you look at the 4.0 rubric, it's so generic with like, do they know their teacher content, the teacher content knowledge, right? And like I'm in the middle of getting ready for midterm evaluations. Yeah, but that doesn't tell me much. So that one line is not worth including everything because it's really just that one line for standard 2 at least.
Okay. And they don't even want to see like an alignment either with the NCTE standards and that 4.0. Like in the SPA reports I've done, we've always just submitted the addendum because they automatically, it's almost like they turn off when they're looking at it and they see that it's just a generic, or not a generic, but a unit type assessment, they just don't seem to be okay with that. So we typically, I've always only just submitted the addendums.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
states that aren't used to having a unit or a statewide assessment, like this is our common assessment in South Carolina, it makes perfect sense to all of us that we actually use the same tool teachers are evaluated with in our undergrads. Like nowhere else really does that. So they think it's weird. The reviewers just don't even know how to deal with that. So I always suggest just providing the addendum, not the original assessment. I talk about how it's part of the 4.0, but how as an English university supervisor, I'm looking specifically at these items during their clinical practice.
Okay, so when you, I'm going to flip back in the slide deck. When you talk about, hang on, I'm still trying to find it. 3, 4. So when you talk about the assessment 4, excuse me, and you do the, what do I want to say, gosh, what am I trying to think of? The 4 pieces that you have to put in when you're talking about the assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about the assessment, you will talk about, hey, you know, we use 4.0. Yes, that's what I was trying to find. So in A, you would talk about the 4.0,
Mm-hmm.
as well as describing what the addendum is.
Yes, ma'am.
When you do part B, then are you only using the addendum when you're
Yes.
showing the, oh, you guys are awesome. This is great. Thank you. Gosh,
Yes.
that helps so much.
And Judy, as you move forward with this, I know because you're turning it in what, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I'm on spring break next week, so my schedule is a little freer. I mean, if you want to meet and make sure we're on the right,
Okay.
on the right track.
Yeah, I might do that because we're on spring break too. So
Yeah.
this is what, yeah, I'm planning on I was trying to get some of it done today, but I thought, you know, I've done this. And so I wanted to do that first part because I was going to use part of the morning to get it done. But that first part was awesome. They did such a good job. Made your job, Carrie, a lot easier.
I know. I was like,
a lot of the, yeah.
Yeah.
So
all right, 2 more minutes. Let me put in chat my email. If you guys want to meet, if you have specific questions, you know, email me and we'll find a time to meet. But I really, we have a lot of South Carolina programs coming through NCTE, so it's good. But with these new standards, things are just a little, it's finding the right place of where everything fits and how it fits. So.
Carrie, do you mind if I just say one piece to the part B right here with respect to state? I know earlier you were talking about how like when you're aligning those assessments with the individual components, I would say just doing a spot check that where we've got that alignment in the chart, that it's aligning here in B as well. And if I'm going to say it aligns to a component, that I'm saying this is how it aligns to that component, because that is something that's going to be a spot check and cross-referenced as you're from this narrative to the chart.
Yeah. I literally print the chart out as a reviewer. And as I look through assessments, I like use a highlighter. I'm like, yep, they got that. Yep, they're doing that. They're doing that. Oh, they think they're doing that, but they're not doing that. Or they really, sometimes my favorite is when reviewers are like, they are doing this and they're not giving themselves credit. So reviewers try and do that as well. All right, I think we're going to get booted off here in a minute. Any other questions? Otherwise, you can totally email me. Jennifer, thank you for providing the state perspective on that. You are very, very welcome. Yeah, have an awesome rest of your day then. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carrie.